This Week in Startups is brought to you by 8 Sleep, the first bed engineered to improve your sleep through dynamic cooling and heating, detailed sleep tracking, and more. Get the sleep you deserve and supercharge your health and productivity at 8sleep.com/twist. And Zendesk. The best customer experiences are built with Zendesk. Qualifying startups can join their startup program and get Zendesk products free for a full year. Visit zendesk.com/twist today to get started.
Hey everybody, welcome to This Week in Startups. I'm your host, Jason Calacanis, and this is the podcast where we talk about startups, the ecosystem of entrepreneurship here in Silicon Valley, and we thought we would take a pause on our regular programming and do a 10-part series called Scaling Your Startup. In this 10-part series, we're talking about all the basics, as well as some of the nitty-gritty and tactical stuff that we've learned here at Launch. Launch is an investment company in Silicon Valley, which has an accelerator, which has our syndicate, and in which we help companies raise their first couple of rounds of funding. Talking about hundreds of thousands to low millions of dollars. Over 200 investments, we've learned a heck of a lot. And with me to discuss today's topic, which is delighting your customers, one of my favorite topics, is Jason Demant, who runs the Launch Accelerator. Welcome back.
Thanks.
And Emmy Award-winning producer and Managing Director of Education, Jacqui Deegan, is with us. Welcome back.
Thank you.
All right, let's get right into it. We've done 8 of these already: funding your company, communications, business model, team, sales, staying lean, fundraising, details, and then marketing. And then this is our 9th episode, delighting your customers. You can follow along on this deck at thisweekinstartups.com/scale. So you can actually get a copy of this deck. It's a living document. Let's start up our discussion of, in part 9, delighting your customers.
Sure. So we're going to start with the advice we give founders the most, which is they should be talking to their customers.
This seems like obvious advice.
It hopefully is. But we wanted to clarify it and just say it one more time because it's always worth repeating. So when founders are in doubt about a big strategic decision, where the next channel they want to test for marketing or advertising, what feature to build next, the most important thing they can do is talk to their customers. And especially at the early stage, one of the pieces we recommend for founders in terms of their focus is they should be building and they should be talking to their customers. And that is basically it. I think we generally see at the early stage that founders stay rather focused on this. And as they start scaling, they get a little too busy and they feel like there are other things that they should be doing. And this is where we find a big mistake. It's easy to believe that there's more important work to be done. And so as we see founders start to scale their business, one of the things that they do is they say that they may answer support emails or they read survey responses. And this just isn't enough. We recommend to continue to talk to your customer because, again, you need to understand who they are. You need to understand what they read, what conferences they attend, what apps they use, the additional challenges they have, their aspirations. And you can't get that when you're answering support emails or reading survey responses. You actually
survey responses are a solid way to get feedback. What's the limitation of a survey response?
Sure.
Because you're saying it's not enough. Mm-hmm. And I think some people do surveys and they feel like that is enough. And we had the CEO of Qualtrics on, and they do a lot of different surveys from NPS to following up to why did you say you scored at that number, et cetera. These seem to be the industry standard. What actually do you do beyond the survey and why?
Yeah. So to be clear, surveys should absolutely be a part of pretty much everyone's company. I think they are absolutely helpful, but we don't want founders to be fooled to the fact that they're getting a complete picture of their customers, which you're often not getting. Oftentimes people will not be completely honest in a survey. They may hold something back. You know, there's a big concept of like the 5 whys. And so when you can't do that in a survey, but if you ask somebody something and then you can ask why and why again and why again. And anyway, the end result is at the 5th why you get kind of down to the base reason for that. And you can't get that from a survey.
We see this sometimes, Jacqui, when we do our events. You do surveys and we get surveys back. Do you find that the raw scores are the most helpful, or the qualitative stuff, or talking to the founders at the events?
I think all three are definitely for different reasons. I think at a glance, you want to get the quantitative scores, figuring out why someone was scored so low or so high. Then you dig into the qualitative accounts. But then I like to be there in real time one of the things that I really enjoy and is very helpful to me in my job is to watch people's reactions, how they interact with the speaker, whether they're engaged, whether they're, on their phone and telling them to turn off their phone, how engaged they are in real time. And that says a lot as well.
So watching them as opposed to asking them questions,
right?
Which is really what data is. When you think about looking at your log files or looking at Google Analytics or, that kind of thing, you're actually seeing their behavior. So I think talking to them and studying them is definitely going to get you some really great feedback. And of course, with Inside, my newsletter company, inside.com, I encourage the writers of each newsletter to say, hit reply and tell us what you think. And boy, do we get some crazy ideas. We get some weird stuff that we didn't realize we had so many people in red states reading the newsletter. And even something very slight, like we were talking about immigration, and we said only 26% of immigrants in the country are here illegal. And we got this really interesting, like, hey, that's loaded language. Why didn't you just state 26% as opposed to putting only? And it was like, wow, that is really actually good feedback, because it could be, you could say 1 in 4 are here illegally.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Over 1 in 4 are here legal, more than 1 in 4, and you're charging the language. So that's something we wouldn't have had that discussion, and would have been a blind spot if the person just hadn't chosen to respond. And people were like, it's going to create too much feedback. In your own organization, people will try to protect you sometimes, I'm using air quotes, from your data. You probably have seen this. And you guys probably have discussions sometimes. Do we need to bring this to Jason or not? Yeah. And sometimes it's like, yeah, we don't need Jason to deal with this. We'll talk to this vendor and resolve this problem. Other times it might be something I really want to know. So you have to understand that your team might protect you from data that you actually need to know. So give your team permission and give your customers permission to tell you bad news. So ask the customer, hey, is there anything we could be doing better, or is there anything we're doing wrong? And again, asking them multiple times sometimes will unlock something.
So one of the best practices we recommend to founders is to make it easy to talk with your customers by automating it. So one of my favorite examples, one of our portfolio companies, they run a B2B business. And after a new customer, so they don't have a tremendous amount of new customers, so they can, this one's easy for them. But after a new customer has been on the platform for 30 days, they have an automatic email that goes out to that new customer introducing themselves, and they request a meeting, and they put a Calendly link in there or something to that effect, that the customer can then book the meeting. And the beautiful thing about this is the founder just has customer meetings on their calendar. It's built into their day.
Wow.
It's automatic.
That is a power move. Can we say who that is, or no, shouldn't?
Yeah, it's actually Amelia from Growth Boulevard is one that does that.
So after 30 days in the program, an email goes out that says, here's my calendar if you want to talk.
Yep.
So she has just automated that feedback loop.
Yep.
Wow, how brilliant is that? Founders are using tons of tools, techniques, and tactics to make their startups more efficient. But you know what you need to make more efficient? Your sleep. You need to focus on your sleep, because the number one correlation to your performance as a founder, which by the way is the number one correlation to your startup success, is your sleep. If you're not sleeping right, if you're not getting your great 8 hours of sleep, well, there's going to be a problem. You're going to be grumpy at work. You're going to make bad decisions. You're going to be exhausted. You're not going to have mental clarity, and you're going to get beat by the competition. 8 Sleep is the first bed engineered to improve your sleep. And I have been sleeping on it now for a couple of weeks, and it has been transformative for me. They use something called a thermo alarm. Basically, you take out the app and you can set what temperature you want the bed to be at. Positive 10 in terms of warm, or negative 10 in terms of cold. And you split the bed in half, and then in the app, you invite your spouse or significant other, if you're lucky enough to have one, to have their side of the bed. What this means is the climate wars have ended. And my side, nice and cool. My wife's side, nice and warm. And sometimes the dog jumps in the bed. The dog is a bulldog. They pant. They need a cool bed. So now Fondue, my loving bulldog, has been sleeping on my side on the nice, cool bed. And then if that wasn't enough, it knows how you're sleeping because it's tracking you as you're sleeping there, and it gives you a sleep score the next day, and it updates you. And then you can choose, if you want to share your sleep score with your spouses or your significant other sitting in the bed next to you. This has led to my wife and I talking about, did we get a good night's sleep and how are we feeling? we've just gotten healthier. I'm getting better sleep. And it does this thermal alarm where it cools the bed off if you want to wake you up naturally in the morning. It has supercharged me. I feel so well rested. I am not kidding you. I love this thing. I am never going to sleep on any other bed but 8 Sleep. I want you right now to get an 8 Sleep bed at 8sleep.com/twist. 8 Sleep, EIGHT, obviously, sleep.com/twist, TWIST. And you can try the product risk-free for 100 days. If you don't like it, they'll take it back. I love this bed. Thank you to the team, the Silicon Valley team that made the 8 Sleep bed. This is the Tesla of beds. I kid you not. Get this, do a calm meditation the next day, and you're going to be awesome. It's going to be transformative for your health. I love it. 8sleep.com/twist.
Now, NPS, one of our favorite customer delight metrics is NPS, Net Promoter Score. What is Net Promoter Score? So this is really a great way to find out if your customers are happy, right? So it's when you ask them, how likely is it that you would recommend our company or product or service to a friend or colleague? So it's that very specific language. And they rate you on a scale of 0 to 10. Now, the ones who give you your 9 or 10 are your promoters, your advocates. They love you and they will fuel your growth. The 7 to 8s are sort of passives. They're sort of neither here nor there. And the 0 to 6s are detractors. So they're just unhappy. Now, to calculate the NPS, you're going to want to take the percentage of detractors subtract the percentage of detractors from percentage of promoters, and you're just leaving out the passive group. So if you're surveying 100 customers and 40% are detractors and 50% are promoters, that's an NPS score of 10. So that's 50 minus 40. So the range overall is minus 100 to plus 100. So honestly, anything considered above 0 is decent, but obviously we want to try to much higher. I think 0 to 30 is considered good. 30 to 70 is great, and above 70 is excellent. So
yeah, it's otherworldly.
It's otherworldly.
Like above 60 or 70, you're starting to get to Tesla.
Yep,
iPhone.
Tesla's, I think, is the highest at 96 that I've seen.
One thing to keep in mind about that is early adopters, the people who first get into your product and who really love it, sometimes they'll be overly enthusiastic. Think about me with my Tesla at first, or any of those early Tesla people. They were spending a lot of money. And so when asked if they would recommend it to a friend, because they were so vested in it, they're going to say it's great. They're not going to be very critical. So the promoters sometimes don't give you great feedback because they're so drunk on their decision and they're reinforcing it. So there is that little caveat about early adopters. Someone like a Robert Scoble, who's like a maven for technology, he might love everything and just be crazy off the charts. Of course, everybody has to own this new camera. Everybody has to own this new car. Over time, when you get the massive middle and the laggards into a product, then you start getting a more realistic score.
Yeah.
And then how you bucket the score is super important, because if somebody is indifferent, well, their feedback might be critical because it could make them into an advocate. And somebody who hates the product and the service, well, maybe they have like a very specific problem. It's not a feature. It's somebody didn't return their call or they got billed twice. It may be something very, very acute that can be just relieved and you all of a sudden move them. The people who are 9 and 10, that's really hard to figure out. Why are they so enthusiastic? What is it? And what you want to try to do is move people from one group to the other. And it's not easy. It's hard.
And some best practices, I think, for tracking the NPS. In addition to just that one single question, which is very useful, you also want to open the door for qualitative feedback, as we were talking. So send surveys with open-ended questions to give you more insight in a way that doesn't feel like nagging. Like you have to sort of set up a cadence that makes sense for your product. So you're not just sending them out every week or randomly and everything else. So launch or just like figure out what that best is and ask some questions like what specific questions, like what features do you like the most? What is the most valuable to you? What do you like the most or the least? Just so you're getting good feedback.
Why did you pick 7 or why did you pick 9 is a typical follow-up question to an NPS 0 through 10 scoring.
Yeah. And you can bucket them by, say, cohort analysis is a good way to do it. Maybe segment customers based on when they signed up so that you're figuring out over time, are you losing people after month 2, after month 4? Or you can also do it by, if you have pricing tiers, you can figure out which plan is working better than others, or maybe you'll figure out that only the free plan is rated really high, which is not great for revenue, but it's good data to get. So there's just a number of ways to do it. But really, it's like you want to have a cadence and really put some thought into when you're getting feedback from people. Great. I think one of the things that is a debate is really what to do with these passives. And I think that some people would actually argue that you just ignore them completely. They're just sort of dead weight. You're never going to convert them. But I think there's another way to look at it that we're going to talk about next a little bit with our next slide. Should we keep going?
For sure.
So this is another way to sort of break it down of product and market fit. And this is going a little bit deeper because obviously if you don't have product market fit, then customers are not going to be delighted by your product. They're not even probably going to use it.
Let's define what product market fit here is for the audience.
I think that there's a number. Sure. I think that if you have customers who love you and are willing to pay, that's the very start of product market fit.
Yeah.
And then it just scales as it goes. So
yeah.
I think everyone would have a different. Devin, I don't know. What is your definition of product market fit?
I mean, this is why I'm particularly excited to talk about this measurement that we're going to go in next. Is this actually gives a quantifiable way to say, do we have product market fit?
Right.
And that it helps you really hone in on the target of the audience that you have the strongest product market fit with.
Yeah, how they would feel if your product went away is one of the reverse ways to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Would you recommend this to somebody? What would you do if the product went away?
Yep.
And how upset would you be? Is a really critical question, which I think is maybe what we're going to get to.
Yeah,
right
that's exactly it. And a real sort of pioneer in this is Rahul Vora, who's our founder of Superhuman, and he developed this sort of engine for figuring out if you have product market fit. And that's exactly right. The first thing is you ask your customers, how would you feel if you could no longer use the product? And then you split them into 3 groups: very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, and not disappointed. And your goal, according to Rahul, and actually Sean Ellis of Growth Hackers, who he kind of took parts of this from.
He built on.
Yeah, exactly. The goal is that you want to get to 40% who are very disappointed. If your product went away. And then if you get 40%, you found product market fit. So Rahul and his team did an early survey of their customers, and they got about 22%. Only very disappointed. So they developed this engine for optimizing it and to figure out how to get to product market fit. So one of the first things was really to identify your high expectation customers. So you take the very disappointed if your product goes away group, and then you kind of drill down into that group. So you tease them out by job title and function, and say maybe you'll find out that, for example, engineers are the ones who are using the product more, and then you sort of cater to that group and figure out, kind of give them more and more questions. Like, so say if engineers make up the highest percentage in your very disappointed group, then you can focus on their feedback even more.
Yeah.
And they also included other questions like what type of people would benefit the most from this product. And the answers to those questions were helping them figure out who their ideal customer really was.
Right.
So they could just continue to focus that and just continue to segment those users even more.
And it would pay here to explain that Superhuman is an email client going up against Gmail that's more elegant and you pay for it and it's faster. So the idea of building a product that competes with a product that is free from multiple vendors and that everybody uses, that's really hard to find product market fit with.
Right.
So they had to come up with this framework because to get people to pay $1 a day for Gmail, a better version of Gmail, you really need to have a certain group of people who value their time so much that saving, 30 hours a year, 1 hour a week, 50 hours a year would be worth $300 a year. And they have, but it wouldn't work for people who are not high expectation customers when you think about it.
Yeah.
So this is where understanding who really needs your product, and the indifferent people, well, if it went away, they go back to Gmail. Or if Calm went away, I would go back to, using some free meditation videos I found on, YouTube, but I wouldn't be disappointed. Other people would be like, well, I lose my streak. I would lose my data in the system. I would lose sleep stories. I would lose this specific meditation coach who I love. I really love this person's voice. So they would be really bummed out. There's an example of like a customer who doesn't really care. They could take their meditation from anywhere versus one who really cares about the Calm.com offering, for example.
So then once you have identified your high expectation customer and gotten their feedback, then you're going to double down on your best customers and address what's holding back the others, which I find interesting because it's a slightly different take on other folks who would put those passives and NPS score and kind of ignore them. This is actually saying like those are the ones that you want to convert, really.
Yeah.
So it's another way to look at it, which I think is interesting.
When I look at this, I think about the Marvel movies as an example. When the Marvel movies first came out, they're like, well, there's a dedicated comic book audience for these films.
Yeah.
Right? We know this product market fit for a superhero film with kids and comic book fans. What they were able to do was make the stories so good and make the actors so high end and the acting so good, special effects and other things as well, that when you look at the product market fit of the Marvel movies, they matched not only everybody in America, but everybody on a global basis. They were able to find product market fit for everybody. So I think the reason they were able to do that, they said, we don't just want to service the comic book fans. What would people who are not comic book fans like to see in a film? Well, they want to see human interaction. They want to see human storylines. They want to see love and disappointment and friendship and drama. So they added those components to it, and it made it more accessible, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so looking at those people who are indifferent, which is how I look at them, they're kind of like they're using your product, but they could take it or leave it.
Right.
Getting them to become passionate, they're already using your product, so now you just have to add some stuff to the product that is so exceptional that they take note.
Yeah.
So it's actually a lot easier than one might think. You just have to delight them, right? And the concept here is to delight your customers.
Right.
It could be something very simple that people find delightful. For Square, some people just found the receipts very delightful. For some people, Twitter not having to tip was delightful. I don't want to have to deal with the tipping or using cash, whatever it is. And you don't know what it's going to be. And that's why testing it is so important, but staying focused on it. Think about this. If you're not doing this, if you're not doing NPS and you're not tracking product market fit with how would you feel of this product if you could no longer use this product? If you're not doing those and your competitor is, how much more did they know about your shared customer base? That's what you have to really ask yourself.
Right. And Ryan Smith from Qualtrics, who was just on this podcast last week, he mentioned that 80% of CEOs think that they're doing a great job delivering great experiences to their customers, and only 8% of those customers would agree. So the idea is what you just said, is like you want to be measuring and tracking and improving.
We do it
every
for
time.
every event we have, every Founder University. You do it halfway through the accelerator and at the end of the accelerator. What's the best qualitative advice you got? And then how did you productize, or how did we productize it? What's the best feedback you or we got, and how did we productize? I can think of one.
Yeah. I imagine I'm thinking of the same one. So the focus around fundraising was always a primary goal for the accelerator, but we never, I think, explicitly communicated that with founders, and the founders calling us out on needing more support during that process in the survey ultimately led us to doing pipeline reviews for our founders, and where on a weekly basis I am on a one-on-one basis looking at how they are progressing through their fundraising process, giving them feedback, talking about next steps, and making sure that they're are giving themselves the best opportunity to close their round.
Right. And that pipeline review, which you actually paradoxically have one right after the taping of this, really has changed the mindset. And we really crafted this product. And what's interesting about that discussion is you got this qualitative feedback. You and I discussed it. And then you came up with an idea, and I was like, let's just double that. And it was like, and you were like, double it? And what that is just signaling I have as an entrepreneur that when you find something like that, sometimes your gut, you just know. Like I hear it. And it's almost like being a poker player, and I know exactly what cards the other person has. And I know I'm beat and I have to fold, or I know I'm going to win and I've got to get all the money in the pot. It was such a winning idea to me that when you told it to me, I was like, oh my God, that is the focus. Double it. And we came up with the scoring system, and now we've really productized it. That's a perfect example of something we were doing well. Then we went to doing it good, then great, then exceptional. And now the founders, if they can't raise money through our accelerator and come out of the accelerator with $1 million or $2 or $3 or $4 of funding, you have to ask yourself, like, there's something wrong with the product that we're dealing with here. Maybe it's not venture scale. There's something broken.
Which is a really important thing for founders to know as well. So it's either way, we feel like the founder has learned a tremendous amount about their company and know how to basically proceed next.
Right. If you can't clear a market after that level of detail and diligence and effort, it's time for a pivot.
Right.
Or the world just doesn't understand and everybody's gotten it wrong and you should persevere. That's like 1 in 100 or 1 in 1 million. You already know Zendesk because it's the world's best customer support system. But what you may not know is that they have an entire range of products they call the Zendesk Suite. And the Zendesk Suite includes an integrated customer support product that lets you track, prioritize, and solve customer tickets across all of your channels on one dashboard, whether it's email or chat, any of those places. It also has the Zendesk guide, and here is my CMO Presh signing up for Zendesk. Look how easily he can sign up, and you can sign up right now along with my CMO Presh at zendesk.com/twist. And this is the craziest offer in the history of This Week in Startups. I am thrilled to make this announcement. Qualifying startups, which are Series B or below and under 100 employees, can join the Zendesk Startup Program and get Zendesk products for, you ready for this price? Free for a full year. They want to help startups grow. They understand that if they grow with you, you will support them down the road. They were a startup themselves one day, like 12 years ago, I remember. Zendesk.com/twist, Zendesk.com/twist, so you can get started today. You can do live chat in the app where you engage with customers in real time, which a lot of people like. You can do the Zendesk Guide, which is a knowledge base for your customers to help themselves with solutions to commonly asked questions. And of course, you have the call center functionality to help customers who want to call on the phone. But I think more and more people want to find their own answer or use that chat. But you can still do the call center stuff, of course. That's the blocking and tackling. And with all of these support channels integrated, your agents are going to be more productive, and they're going to share this information across your entire company. And you make better decisions when you have data from your customers. It's really important that you listen to your customers, and it's really important that you use Zendesk to do that. Zendesk.com/twist to get a free year. Okay, let's get back to this amazing episode. Okay, let's keep going. Slide 4. We're doing 7 slides here. This is part of This Week in Startups, Scaling Your Startup series. You can get the deck, and you can follow along in the deck at thisweekinstartups.com/scale. We're getting good at decks here at This Week in Startups and launch.
So we talked about tracking NPS and product market fit, which are more digital, kind of passive ways to measure. And so now we'll talk about customer interviews, which are much more direct. So the time when you would do this, the why when you would do this, is typically in the context of scaling your startup, happening around the time when you're raising a large round of funding, you're getting ready to invest a significant amount of resource into your product and engineering teams. And so the goal with your customer interviews is to do user research and then collect and prioritize the insights to ultimately grow the product and set that longer term roadmap. So let's just go through some of the details around these customer interviews. So first thing you're going to want to do is obviously set them up. And so we've generally see not too much of a difference actually in terms of results if you do them in person or remote. We think both can be effective. One important fact here, though, is you need to make sure to recruit both experienced people with your product and inexperienced customers so that you can see both sides of that. We typically see $50 Amazon gift card is good enough to get people to get involved. You want to make sure you're writing a script with no leading questions. And then in general, you want to try to test 3 to 5 things. Too little may not be worth your time. Too much is probably overkill. So once you've got your interview set up, during the interview, you want to make sure
are these in person, on the phone, Zoom, what? Yeah,
so we've seen success in both ways. So in person, you want to make sure that they're using their own device. With a Zoom, that's a requirement. The nice thing about doing it remote is you've got their camera. You can track how they're using their computer, and it makes them feel like they're in their own environment.
And there's a ton of software to do this too.
Absolutely,
user testing software.
Yep. We'll talk about some tools at the end, actually. So the other thing during the interview, you want to have somebody leading the interview and then somebody that's a note taker. The person leading needs to make sure they're not using lingo or jargon. You want to make sure to encourage them to talk, ask open-ended questions such as like, tell me more, why do you think this? Why do you think that? In general, we seek 6 to 10 as the number of tests that you need to run, which some people might be surprised at as actually a surprisingly small number, but we find that most of the insights and feedback that you're going to get happen pretty quickly. And then after that point,
if you were doing Gmail or Uber or Calm, what would be an example of a test you might run?
Sure. So let's use Gmail. So perhaps you want to add something around pre-written pre-written like scripts or
Right. Snippets. Yeah.
Yeah. So perhaps you want to add a feature where you can log those in your email and then see how people use them. So you could test
Like boilerplates.
yeah. So how do people add those? How do people use them in the email?
Do they even know they exist?
Right. And then another, I'm sure we all see this in Gmail now. It's kind of guessing while you're typing. How do people react to that? Are they going to use them and so forth? I think those would be two interesting tests for in-person customer interviews or remote customer interviews.
Yeah, like if you think about labels and folders, like they don't have folders in Gmail. It's a big controversy, but they had labels.
Right.
Because they were search companies, so they said you don't really have to label stuff. You don't need to put it in folders. Just search for the keyword. You'll find it. We'll find it. We're Google. And people were just like, no, I want my folders. I want to put things into folders. I get an email, I organize it. That's the action I take, is to put it in the folder. And they're like, okay, we'll let you put labels on. And they were just being like really like persnickety about like their philosophy. And they finally gave up, but they're called labels. And you could imagine like trying to get somebody to use Gmail in the early days who was an Outlook user or a Eudora user or something. And like, oh, no, we don't have folders. We have labels. Yep. Like it must have been totally confounding in those user interviews.
Yeah. So finally here, you've set up your interviews, you've run your interviews, and now, of course, the next thing to remember is obviously to take action. And so typically we see people organizing this in a spreadsheet where you've got everything organized. And then what you want to try to do is now rank pieces of feedback by the impact that it's going to have on the business, most likely in terms of revenue or engagement, and then also how difficult it is. And then that helps you take those pieces of insights and it helps rank them for your product roadmap.
So the team internally can then debate, hey, our customers have told us what would delight them.
Right.
Here's the impact it's going to have on revenue. Here's the impact we guess it's going to have. You're making some sort of prediction.
Yep.
And what's great about making a prediction and then putting how much work it's going to be, you can then start to make a really scientific, and trackable decision-making process. Because in startups, sometimes people just defer to whoever the founder is, or the founders, or you might have two different camps for two different founders in the same company. What's nice is for people to say, well, we all agree this is going to take 8 developer days, and we have 20 developer days this month. So do we want to spend 40% of our resources on it or not? And what is the potential outcome? If the potential outcome is we're going to please 2% of the users, well, that's not worth it. Well, if the potential outcome is you're going to please 2% of the users, and those 2% of the users are going to go from 100 seats to 1,000, well, maybe it is worth it. So you have to actually really sit there and say, not what do I emotionally think? Because your gut is how you start businesses. But when you scale businesses, which is the topic of this series, it has to become a little bit less about your gut and more about a process, right? And if you just think about our investment, today we pitched, our investment company, and we're thinking about, hey, what do we do well? What is our process? How is this architected? Okay, we have Jacqui on education, connecting with a large group of founders. Oh, then Demant does his accelerator and gets them. We get on the cap table, then, Ashley is doing a syndicate for them. We're owning a larger amount. What percentage ownership do we have versus what do we historically have? Less than 1%, now 15%. You're starting to see us studying our investment process and how we work with founders. You can do that with your customers and make just better decisions. And that's really what startups are. It's a series of decisions. It's a series of problems, of puzzles, whatever you want to call it, and then decisions of how you're going to solve those puzzles and in what order. You can't solve all of them immediately. And what people do is they sometimes get addicted to solving puzzles so much that they solve the puzzle of speaking at an event, or they solve the puzzle.
A non-important puzzle.
A puzzle that is literally not important. They solve the puzzle of getting more votes on their, Hacker News story or something like that. If that drove people to your website to become customers, sure. But you want to make sure you're picking the right battles in your startup because you cannot fight on all fronts.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, let's keep going.
All right.
So we're going to talk about customer service next. And one of the many reasons I appreciate working with you, Jacqui, is that I think your customer service is truly top notch. So would love for you to tackle this one. So what are your recommendations for strong customer service for startups?
Sure. Well, customer service, first of all, is very important. I mean, that should not be surprising. There's a lot of research out there about how even one bad customer service experience can lose you a customer, and why people stay with great customer service. I think more than 50% of Americans have scrapped a planned purchase or transaction because of a bad customer experience. 70% more will pay doing business, continuing with great service. So it's really important. Kevin Hale, who's a partner at YC, has said, which I love how this is, being customer intimate is one path toward market dominance that everyone can do at any stage of their company.
Well, let's
so that's
unpack that
really
for a
important.
second,
Yeah. I mean, as a
Customer
startup,
intimate.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't, as a startup, you really can't afford to lose anyone.
Yeah.
Particularly in the early stages. And to lose a customer for bad customer service is just, it's unnecessary.
Yeah.
You know?
And you saw us do this internally with the syndicate.com, where I said, what can we do to build a deeper relationship?
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, well, let's do an onboarding phone call. Let's send an onboarding email with, here are some episodes of the Angel podcast, angelpodcast.com. And here's a copy of Jason's book in case you don't have it. So there's no excuse.
Right.
Now, half the people say, I don't need the book. I've already read it. But the other half, we get them the copy of the book, which just saves us from having to worry that they are going to make mistakes, angel investing, and regret it.
Yeah.
And Ashley talking to those people, and then us doing the Angel University tour and me going out and meeting a lot of those people has really deepened our relationship. And I really like this being customer intimate.
One extra interesting piece, I'm familiar with this Kevin Hale quote, is that he basically boiled it down to three ways that a company or startup can win. And that's one is innovation. So that'd be, Apple is the prime example of how a company wins on innovation. Pricing. So that would be, your Amazon, your Walmart, in terms of, really having low pricing and typically scale.
Yep.
And then the third one is being, customer service, customer intimate. And the only
Zappos.
And the only one of those three that a startup can truly embody from the beginning is the last one, being customer service, customer intimate.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes a company will have a technologically gifted team.
Sure.
But that typically is harder. And I guess it depends where you put product. Do you put product under the customer umbrella, or do you put product under the tech umbrella? Because I think founders can also punch above their weight by building just very thoughtful products, right? And if you think about what's a thoughtful product, it's not just the app, it's the service and the flow of the app, right? And just thinking that piece through. But let's keep going here. This is great.
So some things you want to think about. So you want to be hiring the right people for customer support and customer success. And there are a number of ways to look at it. So, but first, you really want to define it. Now, David Hassel of 15Five, he's one of your portfolio companies making employee management software. He's defining customer support as someone who's responding and to things that come up already, what needs to be set up or fixed. Customer success, that was more about relationship building and someone who can really help the customer figure out what they're trying to accomplish and work with them to achieve their goals. So these are different roles. And so you just want to make sure that you're hiring the right person for the right role and be committed to it, like be intentional. And I think that one way to do that is to really start from the beginning. You want to build a culture around customer service. So, if someone requests something from you, you acknowledge it, give them a timeline. There's just many different practices you can put in. You're talking about some of the things that we do at Launch. But that it has to start from the top, and it has to be something that's in the culture and grown in the culture.
Yeah.
Are there any other examples you can think of customer service that you've seen in your portfolio founders that are really particularly good at kind of that piece of it?
Yeah, I mean, 15Five makes feedback software for internally, for companies, for managers to have their employees talk to them. So 15Five should naturally be very good at taking feedback there. I think we do a tremendous job here internally of when we have an event and we know VCs are coming, you guys are greeting them at the door, right? The managing directors are greeting. We don't hire somebody with a clipboard to greet them, right? Or if they come over my house for the barbecue, I'm going to be there cooking for them. Now, do I need to barbecue for everybody and cook them the brisket? No, but boy, is it a nice touch when they know I spent 12 hours on that brisket and I'm searing the Kobe beef for them with the Wagyu and kind of making that experience, very personal. And I like this idea and this concept of the intimate and the personal, because in that moment when people are having a problem, you get to really demonstrate what type of person you are, right? What type of company you are. And we've all had that experience where somebody's like, well, no, I have to charge you to check out 15 minutes late. And you're like, okay, yeah, but I'm just getting off this conference call. It's really important. Like they doesn't matter if you leave the hotel room at 1 or 1:30. There's people not checking in until 4, and they just give you a hard time about it. You're like, well, I just don't want to stay in this hotel anymore.
Right.
I had that experience recently. I just wanted to have a coffee machine in my room because I like to have an espresso now and again. And when I'm writing, I don't like to have to go down to Starbucks, and I don't want to order room service for $30. What's that?
It's a fundamental right in a hotel room. I'm shocked that you didn't have one already.
It's paradoxical, but I started staying in slightly nicer hotels since I made more money. And as you go up in hotel quality, the chance of getting a coffee machine goes down.
Wow.
And I'm like,
I
told the person, I was like, listen, hey, if I was at a Holiday Inn, they would have a machine here or whatever. Like a W would have an espresso. They're like, no, we're like the Ritz-Carlton. We want to price gouge you for a $4 pot of coffee. And I'm like, okay, fine, whatever.
Yeah.
Now I'm trying to find a portable espresso machine that I can travel with so I don't have to deal with this nonsense. I just want to have my own coffee with me. I want to be like one of those wacky San Francisco people with a grinder in their room. All right, keep going.
All right.
So
how's that going to come up on my survey with, I literally put it in my survey too, by the way. The Beekman Hotel sent me the survey in New York, and I just wrote them back, and I was like, it's $400 a night or whatever, $450 a night. I'm like splurging on my tour. I'm like, it's $100 more than I need to pay for a room. And I was like, you guys can't even send me a coffee machine. I was really disappointed.
Yeah.
It's outrageous.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
What often happens with founders is they get away from staying focused. And so that's the point of this next one. And
Slide 6.
Yes, slide 6. So the advice we generally tell founders is beware of the shiny object. Founders are inherently curious people.
Yes.
That's why they started the company.
Yep.
And as you start growing that company, the founders need to be self-aware enough to actively check that curiosity.
Yeah.
Because when a company stops growing or starts growing more slowly, generally what has happened is a founder has lost focus.
Yes.
And so one of the other things we talk a lot about here is doing one thing great. And, two of our favorite examples are Calm and Uber. Their core products were refined and locked before they started adding additional features on top of it.
Yes.
It was the meditation. It was I guess it was Black and X in terms of ride hailing.
Yep.
But it was very focused. Another analogy that I've stolen from you is our oil analogy, which is you've struck oil.
Yes.
Do you keep going down and trying to get more oil, or do you say, I wonder, what's 10 feet over that way?
Let's reposition.
Let's reposition
the rig.
Yeah.
It's like, no, keep drilling.
Yeah, exactly. Keep pushing down. And this is applicable to so many different things. It's product features, but it's also marketing and sales as well. If you find a channel that's working well, rather than going to a new one, you got to keep drilling down.
It's also
further
is
on
life.
Sure.
If you have a mate or you have like a friend, you can become better friends, deeper friends, or you could become more in love. Yeah. Or you can just pop up the rig and go somewhere else and be like, I'm going to go fall in love with another person. And I have some friends who they just bounce and bounce and bounce. And I'm like, if you stuck around a little bit more and put a little more work into this, you might actually have a relationship that flourished to a level that you're missing the reward of year 10 of a relationship or year 5 or whatever it is. You've been through this yourself, so you understand. Okay. Doing one thing great. Yes.
Yep. And then this is one thing that I try to remember myself is done is better than perfect. And so, when you're sending an email, something that you've proofread 5 times, or the blog post that you've been working on that's been a draft for 3 weeks, or perhaps a big deck for an investor, done is better than perfect.
Yes.
It's time to ship. It's time to get it out there. It's just, it's better to get it done.
Yeah. And, sometimes you're going down and you're drilling for that oil and, you got some oil and then it dried up, and sometimes the rig breaks or it's hot out, and you're going to have a lot of not only distractions, but it could also be arduous because you're covered in oil, it's dirty, and it's a hard process, right? Drilling for oil is a hard process.
Yep.
And so that's another thing that can get people distracted, is just how arduous it is. And I think part of Shiny New Object is I am not only bored with doing the 50th newsletter at Inside. I'm bored with asking the writer to make it 10% better again. Literally, my life at Inside has been meeting with the team every week and saying, okay, last week we tried to make this better. Did it work? Well, 8 out of 10 people did what we asked them to do, and 3 of them got it right. I'm like, okay, next week, let's try to make it even a little bit better. And you guys have been overhearing me sometimes on these calls, and I'm like arduously, it's like literally pushing a rock up the hill. And then writer leaves, got a full-time job. Okay, now I got to get the rock at the bottom of the hill and push it back up again. But at least now I know, Sisyphus with the rock, you get better at pushing that rock up. You get stronger, right? And you have to enjoy that process. You have to enjoy the process of pushing the rock up the hill or drilling for that oil. If you don't enjoy that process, you should not be the founder or work at a startup. Every time we start a new class, whether it's Founder University or the Launch Accelerator, we're starting with another group of applicants. And we have to narrow it down. And we have to meet them. And some of them are really weird or strange or obnoxious or inspiring and amazing. And we have to go through that process again. How do you keep your enthusiasm up for the 201st investment, the 401st investment, the 4,000th investment? The only way to keep your enthusiasm up for that is you actually enjoy that process. Right. So what I try to explain to people is enjoy the process. Yep. Enjoy the process. Take a moment to say, I enjoy this process with you guys to sit here and do this podcast. To me, this isn't like, oh, when is it going to end? You know that because sometimes we go into hour 2 and I want to keep talking. If you know what you enjoy doing, then it shouldn't be a problem. And that's why doing what you love, and when we talk about founder product or founder market fit, it's really founder startup fit. But if the founder doesn't love meditation or transportation or trading stocks for Robinhood, coming in for the 1,000th day at that job, you're only in year 3 then. The 1,000th day of that is a prison sentence. You don't want it to be a prison sentence. You want it to be a vacation. What we do is a vacation to me. Doing a podcast, going to Australia is a literal vacation as well. But, doing this, coming and doing office hours for me, that's like being on vacation. If I was on vacation and somebody said, oh, you're on vacation in Hawaii, will you come speak to a group of founders? We're like, yes, sure. I'd love to do that on my vacation. That's the perfect vacation for me. So my vacation, is my work.
Yeah. Great. So I think we'll wrap up this one and talk about some tools around, delighting customers. So the first one is we wanted to categorize was customer service.
Sure.
So Zendesk is one of our partners as well, and particularly,
fantastic,
what we love about them is how startup friendly they are, and the fact that you can get multi-channel into one dashboard as well.
Yeah, it's great.
So it's not just email. Front as well is another product that we've used from time to time here, and have seen good success there. The next category, customer messaging. Intercom, we've had Des Traynor on the show a few times. So that's the software that you often see when you go to a website and it pops up from the bottom right. And it's
and you can write that yourself if you want to. There's open source software that does that. There's Intercom, Drift, SendSmart. A bunch of people do that. We started doing it. I'm not sure who we're using. I think it's Zendesk, actually. We started doing it on the syndicate.com site. And people then ask us a question and it sends them a welcome email. So talking about that automation, we've automated that process. You go to the syndicate.com, you ask a question or two, you ask you to put the email in, it sends you a welcome email and then starts a thread with Ashley. It's amazing what this automated marketing and customer support can do to delight customers.
We've recently invested in SendSmart. They also help in this process as well in terms of automating your response to your customers when they engage with you. Next, NPS tracking. So we talked about that in the show. There's a bunch of great tools that can help you track that in an automated way. Ask Nicely, Retently, Wootrick, either us or our portfolio companies have all engaged with these 3, and we can recommend those. And then finally, in terms of your email customer service, we use MailChimp here, and we're also looking at Autopilot. And then one of our portfolio companies, AmpJar, is particularly good if you are an e-commerce company for automating some of your email communication.
You can take an Instagram account and make it into beautiful, templated, gorgeous emails. It works really well.
Do it very simply.
All right. Well, I think if we're going to recap here, really the key is focus in on those customers, have a strategy, have techniques, and have discipline around doing it. Do you see this as something that is one person's job in the company or spread out equally across people in the company? How does this manifest itself in a company with under 10 employees, a mid-sized company, let's say 10 to 50 or over 50? How would you think it materializes?
This is one of those things that always starts with the founder. So oftentimes, in almost every facet of your company, your employees will mimic what the founder does, and so the fact that it needs to be instilled from the top, and obviously that's very important at the very early stage. At the very early stage, the founder is probably going to be doing most of the customer service, if not all, at some points, depending on the makeup of their team. And so that's what sets the stage. They're probably initially writing the email templates. They're writing kind of the rules, if you will, in terms of how they want to engage with customers, and putting that playbook in place and actually writing it down is one of the things that I have found has tremendous leverage as time goes on, as the company really continues to grow, because it helps get the mindset of the founder out on paper, and then that can really be instilled as the company starts to grow. And the why is really important as well. Not just here are the rules, but why are we acting this way with customers?
Yeah. That's something I've tried to do a lot more here, is talk about why we're doing stuff, right? Because as you get higher level employees and they have more options of where they could work or what they could be doing with their lives, they want to know why. Why are we doing this? Why? What's the point? Why? I get that a lot from you guys. Why? And I'm like, well, here's why. Let's see. Why do we, spend 30 minutes when we do interview people? There's a very specific why. We've talked about why we're doing that. And it makes sense. On a long-term branding basis to do those 25 minutes with 5 minutes of...
25 minutes twice.
25 minutes twice.
50
so
minutes.
50 minutes when we interview people for the accelerator, plus if they make it to the finals with me again for another 10 minutes.
That's right.
So it's over an hour with us. And I even wanted that to go 3 times. But I don't know if the founders themselves want to go through a third one. Then it might reverse and they feel like you're taking too much of my time and running me through the ringer. I wonder at what point that happens. I was actually thinking, when we have people in for that accelerator interviews, we should come up with some programming, Jacqui, where they're coming in anyway. If we did some programming for them, whether it was like an event or a dim sum or a fireside chat or a live episode or something, to give them something else to do while they're here that they could enjoy, and maybe we could even socialize with them a little bit to get an idea if they're, what kind of people they are.
Yeah.
So something to think about.
Give it some thought.
All right. We got one more of these to go in the Scaling Your Startup series. Thank you to our partners for supporting this. It's been a great series. Thanks to our managing directors today on the program, Jason Demant and Jacqui Deegan, Emmy Award-winning producer Jacqui Deegan. Thank you, Sir Charles, on the ones and the twos. And we will see you all next time on This Week in Startups. Bye-bye.